You're listening to Little Rockers Radio, and today we're chatting to Erin Mayo, editor of Mother and Baby magazine, about TOTS Gone Wild. I love this article title. Erin, how are you?
I'm well, how are you?
I'm really well, thank you. Now let's get some quick tips on managing our little tots that have gone wild. First one, dinner time. How do we get our toddlers to eat?
Don't we all love dinner time? Basically, there's a couple of things that we can do. So, fussy eaters are incredibly common. We've all been there with a fussy eater. But some of the tips that we sort of have in this issue, and we chatted to dietitian Joanna McMillan-Price, or McMillan, for this interview, and she was saying, one of the things is maybe let your toddler sit up at the table with you. So rather than putting him in a high chair, and, sitting him off onto the corner of the room and feeding him or putting his food there, let him sit at the table using a booster seat rather than a table, or, you can get some of those high chairs that go up and down, and let him join in and eat with you. And just by watching what you're doing and what you're eating, you might find that your fussy eater is actually willing to give things a bit of a try. And then one of the other things as well is, just making sure with snack times and things, toddlers snack an awful lot. Sometimes I look at my son and I think, how can you possibly eat that much during the day? Is to make sure that at least sort of an hour before dinner time, he hasn't actually eaten anything, because sometimes he may not actually be hungry. So while we're thinking it's 6 o'clock and it's dinner time, he's just had a bowl of grapes at 5:30, so he's not hungry at all.
Yeah, of course. Now, I also think that having them involved in cooking and setting the table helps with that whole process as well, getting them more involved. Now, moving on to the next one, I had a daughter who liked to bite. It was just her brother, thankfully. We did manage to nip it in the bud quite quickly. But what's your advice for toddlers who bite?
Yeah, now look, you're definitely not alone with this one, and I know as well that you probably were thinking, oh my goodness, my child was a biter. We've all been there as well. I guess the big thing is to not make such a huge deal about, the fact that your child did bite another one, and you're not a failure and all that kind of thing, and it is a little bit of a development thing with toddlers. So biting actually feels very good for them, especially when they're teething. So I actually sometimes like to think of toddlers and babies a little bit like puppies. When he's biting, if he does bite his friends, just be consistent and firm in your response. Remove them away from the situation and explain that no, that actually makes people feel sad, because that is a common emotion to our toddlers. It's one of the emotions that they do actually understand. And the other thing is, of course, immediately apologise to the other parents and to the other child, and give them your attention instead of the child, because that's not what they want after all. They want your attention. So if you're directing that somewhere else, they'll understand that behaviour is actually not acceptable.
Okay, so we're moving on to the last one, which is throwing tantrums. We've all been there. Our precious little gems have all thrown a tantrum when we least need it. What advice can you give us for helping our children or helping ourselves when they're throwing tantrums?
Yes, no, you're right. We have all been there, and I like to sometimes think that the terrible twos are outbeaten by the even more terrible threes tantrums. And I love this sort of camaraderie between mums when, your child is having a tantrum and you get that wonderful look from other mums as, don't worry, sweetheart, I've been there as well. The biggest thing, one of the things is sort of using distraction. So if you're going to the supermarket and you know that your toddler likes to throw a wobbly at the supermarket because you can't have, a lolly from the aisle or something like that, maybe bring along a favourite toy or a favourite snack, or let him tick things off the supermarket list as you go along. I like to do that with my son. We sit in the trolley and he actually sort of, what's on the list? And I say, find me the apples, and we go through the list and he has to find them. And of course, a lot of the supermarkets now do the free fruit for kids as well, which is a great way of distracting them as well. And then the other thing is just focus on your kids. Don't be embarrassed about the behaviour. As I said, we've all been there. So, sort of ignore the onlookers. No one's looking at you thinking, my God, that kid's having an absolute meltdown and she's a terrible parent. Just slow down your breathing, talk calmly to your child, and hopefully they will calm down.
Hopefully they will. And yes, we have all been there. Now, some other topics that are covered in this month's issue of Mother and Baby magazine are getting dressed in the morning rush, which is always a nightmare when you're trying to get out the door and your children are dragging their feet, and also resisting bedtime. As I said, they're all in the current issue of Mother and Baby magazine, available at newsagents, selected Coles stores, and also online. The links are on our website at littlerockersradio.com.au. Thanks so much for joining us today, Erin. It's been great to chat to you.
Thanks, Sarah. It's been fantastic.
That was Erin Mayo, editor of Mother and Baby magazine on Little Rockers Radio. Thanks for listening.